The member for South Perth.
Mr Acting Speaker, first may I join with my fellow members by congratulating the Speaker on his re-election to the position for another term of Parliament. I would also like to congratulate all the 14 new members of the Legislative Assembly on both sides of the House, 12 of whom are in Parliament for the first time. We new members on both sides of the House in this 37th Parliament come from such a diverse range of backgrounds. It's a bit like the butcher, the baker and the candlestick maker. I happen to have the baker sitting alongside me as the member for Serpentine Jarrahdale, and I wish to congratulate him on his inaugural speech. We also have a doctor, a policeman, a veterinary surgeon, a crayfisherman, a city mayor, a radio announcer and a school teacher, a good friend of mine who became better known as a footballer and a commentator in the member for Murdoch. He's on the other side of me. I'm sure this mix of new blood will enable this Parliament to provide an even broader representation to the people of Western Australia. Mr Speaker, or Mr Acting Speaker, I regard it as an enormous privilege to be the member of South Perth. People have asked me since the election what I will bring to this Parliament, and I reply, like the member for Serpentine Jarrahdale, life's experience. I do not come from a background of local government, which I'm sure will help a lot of other members of Parliament and have done in the past, nor do I have a degree in politics. But in my previous career as a journalist, I mixed and dealt with people of all walks of life. And Mr Speaker, I'm not the first from the honourable profession of journalism to go into politics, and I'm sure I won't be the last. I noticed Peter Kennedy up in the press gallery, and I commend him on his outstanding coverage of politics for the ABC, and Peter was a former colleague of mine. I remind the House that the great wartime Prime Minister John Curtin was also a journalist, and I'm proud to have attended the high school in Fremantle, which is named in his honour. John Curtin used to edit a paper called The West Australian Worker. He was also president of the WA branch of the Australian Journalists Association, which I joined as a young reporter coming onto the West Australian. The interesting thing about John Curtin is that he was responsible for another journalist from the West Australian in Sir Paul Hasluck going into politics, and that was into federal politics. Sir Paul was 20 years younger than John Curtin, but they worked together on the WA branch of the AJA, and later John Curtin encouraged the younger Hasluck to go to Canberra to take on a senior public service position, which proved to be a stepping stone for him to go into a political career. The great irony, of course, is that Paul Hasluck became the first member of the seat of Curtin, but he did it as a Liberal. In more recent times, we've seen a number of journalists go into politics. Phil Pendle, my predecessor in the seat of South Perth, was a journalist on the Daily News, and Brian Burke, who later became Premier of our state, was a reporter on the West Australian. Mr Speaker, or Mr Acting Speaker, believe it or not, in this House we have several members with journalistic backgrounds, and I refer to the member for Willagee, the member for Perth, the member for Murchison Eyre, and now the new member for Greenock. Mr Speaker, from a personal point of view, my political ideology is quite simple. I believe politics should never get in the way of an initiative that is going to benefit the state or my electorate of South Perth, and that's the way I will approach the job at hand. And while on the subject, I would sincerely like to thank the people of South Perth for showing the faith and confidence in me to represent them in this Parliament. I would also like to pay special tribute to the Honourable Philip Pendle, who held the seat of South Perth for 12 years after deciding to switch from the Legislative Council. Phil Pendle was the consummate local member of Parliament, someone who put the interests of his electorate before all other priorities. People in South Perth sometimes joke that if someone wanted to buy a new dress or a new suit, they'd ring up Phil first to find out where the best place was to go to do the shopping. Some will say he was unfortunate not to have held higher office in this Parliament. Nevertheless, His will be big shoes to fill, and I thank him for his support and wish him all the best in retirement. I regard coming into this parliament as a privilege and the high point of my working life. In the last 55 years, the electorate of South Perth has only had 3 members of the lower house: George Henry Yates from 1950 to 1956, Bill Graydon from 1956 to 1993, and of course Phil Pendle. Mr Acting Speaker, South Perth is a wonderful and diverse electorate with a rich history that dates back to the settlement of the Swan River Colony in 1829. For most of the 19th century, the peninsula was used predominantly for agriculture and horticulture, and I think of that when I see other new members and hear other new members speak of country electorates and the importance of agriculture. It wasn't that long ago that South Perth was a bit of an agricultural centre for the growing colony. The colony's first successful wind-powered flour mill operated on Mill Point. The same old mill is still preserved today as a National Trust property and is believed to be the oldest industrial property still standing in Western Australia. The people of South Perth have always treasured the area's rich history, and the City of South Perth Historical Register records that in 1957 there was a confrontation between the Main Roads Department and a group of local conservationists when it was found that the ruins of the old mill lay in the path of the proposed Narrows Bridge and Kwinana Freeway. I'm happy to say the conservationists won the day on that occasion. The state government ordered a change in the freeway route, and Perth industrialist Sir Lance Brisbane funded the reconstruction of the mill as a folk museum. The Brisbane family continued to fund the maintenance of the old mill until the early to mid-1980s. Mr Acting Speaker, the people of South Perth are also a very civic-minded community. Evidence of that is the South Perth Community Hospital, which on the 22nd of April 2006 will celebrate its 50th anniversary. In the late 1940s there was a hospital crisis in Perth, so it seems nothing has changed in that regard. Many private hospitals had closed down due to the World War II, and public hospitals had not been expanded due to lack of finances. It was a situation which led to the South Perth Community Centre Association being formed, an appeal for funds being launched, and the people of South Perth had a rather unique way of raising this money. They went from door to door and they sold bricks in the hospital to the residents of South Perth. So if you wanted to have a hospital in the area, you could buy a brick. And they held fetes to the point where the state government of the day subsidised the hospital dollar for dollar. So the hospital was built at an initial cost of $250,000, of which the state government and the Lotteries Commission contributed $90,000 each. So that was a local initiative that the government saw great merit in. Many South Perth residents have come into the world through that very own community hospital. Sadly, the maternity wing no longer exists, but I'm happy to report that the hospital has grown into a first-class medical centre. It is debt-free and has 3 state-of-the-art operating theatres, and the honorary board are all local residents. Mr Acting Speaker, I intend to devote much of my time as a member of this House to securing the wonderful lifestyle and environment that the people of South Perth enjoy today, and I'll work to improve and maintain the services we already have in our electorate. Most people understand, of course, that the electorate of South Perth is bounded by 2 beautiful rivers, the Swan and the Canning, and their future is of major concern to me. Both of these precious waterways have played a tremendously important role in the development of our state. They've provided food for the table of fishermen and their families, recreation for generations of West Australians, and they've served as a means of transport. They've also given our city an aesthetic that is admired and wondered at by visitors. Our river, the Swan particularly, is the nub of a thriving tourist industry. We heard the Minister for Tourism announce yesterday that 587,000 international tourists had visited Perth last year. They would all have seen and admired the Swan River. With the Swan and Canning Rivers, our city of Perth, without the Swan and Canning Rivers, our city of Perth would have just been another big town. But with them providing life and beauty, Our city has been enhanced and it is admired by all who come here. The South Perth foreshore is a jewel in the crown and an area that has become a favourite recreational spot for thousands of West Australians. It has become obvious, though, that the development of Perth and its suburbs has come at a price as far as our two rivers are concerned. Chemical and sewage spills and algal blooms have become a major problem. We saw a report in the West Australian only about a week ago that a beautiful big mulloway was among 130 fish that have been killed by an algal bloom in the Swan River between Guildford and Middle Swan. This is a real concern, and I'm pleased to say that the Swan River Trust is drafting new legislation to impose fines of up to $5,000 a day for landowners whose activities damage the Swan or Canning rivers. The Swan and Canning rivers need to be protected. They need to be nurtured and cherished. To do so, we must be ever vigilant to ensure that the Swan River Trust and any other government departments entrusted with the responsibility of protecting our rivers are adequately funded to do the job. Therefore, it was encouraging to hear today from the Minister for the Environment that new legislation will be drawn up to give the Swan River Trust greater powers to coordinate river management. Government departments must be armed and supported with legislation to ensure that now and into the future, these West Australian icons receive the protection they deserve. I note with interest, Mr Speaker, that the Swan River Trust Riverbank program was recently increased eightfold to $1 million per year as part of state government initiatives to help protect and improve the health of the rivers. I commend the government for this initiative, but warn that it must be an ongoing commitment. As a member for South Perth, I will work to make sure that the funding of the Riverbank program is maintained. Furthermore, if necessary, I will strongly support a joint House inquiry into what can be done to further improve the management of the two essential waterways of Perth. Mr Speaker, getting back to the electorate of South Perth, and it boasts a diverse mix of cultures and special interests. Recent boundary changes have added parts of East Victoria Park and Bentley that were once in the electorate of the Premier, and I welcome those people to my electorate and assure the Premier that they will be... Well, now you've given it back.
It's been going towards Berwick Street and you've taken on East Victoria.
Well, your former electorates, Mr Premier, will be well served as members of the South Perth electorate. So that means the electorate takes in those two suburbs as well as the more traditional areas of South Perth, Como, Kensington, Manning, Solder Point, Waterford and Carrawarra. The electorate also takes in two very progressive local governments, and they are the City of South Perth and the town of Victoria Park. So I look forward to working with both of those organisations. And within the boundaries of South Perth, there are some outstanding facilities for education, commerce, tourism, sport and recreation. We're indeed a lucky electorate. The Curtin University of Technology is the largest university in Western Australia. It's a world-class centre of learning. The main campus is located in Bentley, where there are 25,989 students and an international focus with 6,792 overseas students. And they include the son, or they once included the son of the Indonesian president, Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono, who graduated in February of this year with a commerce degree from the Curtin University. Aquinas, Wesley and Penrose are first-class private colleges, with each having established a reputation in academia, sport, culture and the arts. Between the three colleges there are nearly 3,500 students with nearly 500 boarders, mainly from WA farming towns and communities, and approximately 60 international boarders. In addition to those colleges, we have Clontarf Aboriginal College, also located in Bentley, and it currently runs programs in driver education, creative arts, general studies and sports skills, and we've seen some of those with the graduates from that academy that have gone into the AFL. The college won the 2004 Highly Commended National Achievements Award for quality schooling. Several government schools in the South Perth electorate also have fine reputations. Unfortunately, most of them are getting old, like a lot of government schools. that were built in the 50s, and they need renovation or rebuilding. These schools are continually frustrated at the problems they have in getting government funding. For instance, the Como Primary School desperately needs a covered assembly area for its students. The Manning Primary School has an enormous problem with traffic in the morning and afternoon, and they need a safe drop-off and pick-up zone so that parents can deliver their children and take them away from school without the risk of them being injured. The Kensington Primary School is bursting at the seams as more young families move into the area and the class sizes increase. So they need more classrooms. And another school that I heard about during my campaigning out in Eastwick Park, the Millen Primary School, they need a new toilet block. So we have some wonderful schools in South Perth, but they need assistance. The Como Secondary College is just about falling down around the teachers and the students. It's an old school now, and it might have to be totally rebuilt. So I've made a commitment to my constituents that I will address all of those problems, and hopefully, Mr Premier, we'll get some of the budget, the education budget, into your neighbouring electorate of South Perth. South Perth plays its part in tourism too, with the world-renowned Perth Zoo attracting more than 600,000 visitors a year, many of them making the trip by the ferry, which a lot of us did as kids, and alighting at the historic Mint Street jetty. Hopefully the state government will honour its commitment to put in a rail station near the zoo. I believe that will be happening in stage 2 of the Southern Rail Line. I'm also pleased that in my first term in Parliament I've been entrusted with the shadow portfolios of seniors, racing, gaming and liquor licensing. Some of my friends have unkindly suggested that I can relate to all 4 areas. But Mr Speaker, I can assure this Parliament that I won't be treating any of these portfolios lightly. The seniors portfolio is particularly important to me because we are an ageing population. There's this huge wave of baby boomers, and I'm one of them, and it's about to move into the ranks of the seniors, and that will have a profound impact on the services that we can offer to people over 60. At the recent state election in my electorate alone, which has a bit of an ageing population, we had 28,220 voters. Of them, 9,934 were over the age of 55. That represents 35.2%. In the whole of Western Australia, where there were 1,267,693 voters, the over 55s numbered 403,082. That was 31%. But if you talk to the Council of the Ageing, they say that in the not too distant future, 50% of all Australians will be over 50 years of age. Therefore, seniors cannot be ignored by any government, whether it be the Commonwealth Government or the state government. Older people make a continuing contribution to society through their work, volunteering, family roles and as individual community members. There is a huge challenge facing this Parliament. With regards to my other shadow portfolio, Mr Acting Speaker, that of racing, gaming and liquor licensing, most of the members would be aware of my passion for the racing industry. I grew up in Hamilton Hill, not far away from pretty famous racing and trotting stables, and later moved to Belmont, where my father-in-law, the late Arthur Wagner, was quite a successful trainer. I guess he got me hooked into horses, and I owned my first horse at the age of 24, which I actually raced with a former member of this House, a member for Darling Range, the late Ken Dunn. I think if he was still around, he'd be pretty happy to see me standing here today. Since then, I've bred, owned and trained quite a few horses. Some of them have been quite successful, others I could have beaten on foot, but it's been a good experience. So I believe I have some knowledge of the inner workings of the racing game. The racing industry has made enormous strides since the TAB was formed in 1961, when we're also happy that betting turnover reached $1 million for the whole year. It was a huge figure back then. By the 2003-2004 financial year, that turnover had grown to $1 billion. It should be pointed out, Mr Acting Speaker, that the racing industry, that's thoroughbreds, harness and greyhounds, generated every dollar of that turnover, and at the same time provided about $60 million for Treasury coffers. In the lead up to the recent state election, both the government and the opposition agreed that racing codes needed some relief from what was considered an unfair taxing system. So we look forward to that relief arriving at the racing industry in the coming session of Parliament, and we've already seen evidence of the optimism in the industry at the recent yearling sales. Racing is the only form of entertainment, Mr Acting Speaker, where the entertainer actually pays to perform, yet it offers substantial employment opportunities for a range of people. To some extent, it's an industry that is almost solely reliant on human resources. As someone said to me once, you can't put a computer on a horse's back and send it out to have a training gallop or go in a race. I mean, you need physical labour. Mr Speaker, there is no doubt that the racing industry is about to go through a period of great change and revitalisation under the management of Racing and Wagering West Australia, and I commend the body for the projects that it has already undertaken. The Ascot Racecourse, or headquarters as we used to know, is undergoing a massive re-turfing, and Belmont Park is earmarked for a $1 billion redevelopment that will be down on the Burswood Peninsula, which will be a racing lifestyle complex which will be totally state-of-the-art. The WA Trotting Association across the river also has grand plans for the redevelopment of their course. But administrators of thoroughbred racing face an even greater challenge in the years ahead. If the state's water resources continue to diminish and salinity becomes a major problem, like we've seen recently at Belmont Park and the Burswood Golf Course, administrators might have to decide whether the industry can continue to race on lush and beautiful grass tracks like they have in England, or replace them with some kind of all-weather artificial service that require far less watering and maintenance. Racing administrators in Victoria are already experimenting with artificial tracks for training at places like Ballarat and Seymour. That is one step away from racing on an artificial surface. And let's face it, the Kentucky Derby is raced on an artificial track. And the world's richest race, the Dubai World Cup, is run on an artificial track. The truth is that the oil-rich sheiks, with all their wealth, expertise and availability of desalination plants, have still opted to go for an artificial track for their biggest races. Mr Acting Speaker, these are not just dirt tracks. Modern technology has turned them into state-of-the-art, refined surfaces that provide a much more better galloping surface for the animal, and Australian riders who have ridden overseas have returned to say that horses are far more comfortable on these tracks. So switching some of our tracks from traditional grass to an all-weather artificial surface is not necessarily such an impossible dream. I'm not saying that all turf tracks should be ripped up, but with the scarcity of water and the cost of it, our racing administrators should look at trialling an artificial track that is low maintenance and doesn't require any water. Maybe the training track down at Lark Hill, which is close to the area of the new Minister for Racing and Gaming, could be one to look at. Another challenge, I think, facing racing administrators is to bring back carnival racing to Perth and attract big-name horses, owners, trainers and jockeys from other states. West Australian racegoers should not be denied the opportunity to see the best compete in a carnival atmosphere, as we see at the great carnivals in Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane and to a lesser extent Adelaide. I honestly believe the decision to play around with dates for traditional feature races like the Railway Stakes, the WA Derby, the WA Oaks and the Karrakatta Plate has diminished the focus on the Perth Christmas Carnival as we once knew it. Mr Speaker, in closing, I would like to thank all the people who have given me the opportunity to have a role in such decision making. I want to thank my wife Karen, who's in the gallery today, and I've got to point out that having a wife who's been an advisor to a minister in the federal government means that I'm never short of advice around the kitchen table. I would also like to thank my two children, David and Erin, both journalists, who have encouraged me to run for Parliament. In fact, Erin came all the way back from London, where she's working, to help me on the last 2 weeks of the campaign. I was also fortunate to have the help of a great band of hard-working and loyal supporters, some of whom are up in the gallery. In particular, my campaign committee of Barry Farmer, Keith Ellis, Phil Bruce, Ted Gray, Anne Jones, Kay Durrant, Alan's Chubby Stiles, Paul Farmer and Norm Hayward. I will forever be grateful for their contribution and the faith that they showed in me. In closing, Mr Acting Speaker, I would like to thank the members, in particular the Premier, for their attention today, and I look forward to making a contribution in this Parliament. Thank you.